Okay, right, the last session of the day, we've got Pat Maver from WATIF, and she's going to tell you what WATIF stands for. So another really inspiring community land story, people fighting against the odds to achieve great things for their communities. And then Lindsay's going to tell us a bit about 100 years of community ownership and the programme we've got going this year. And then we're going to ask our 3 new directors to come down and just tell you a bit about who they are, why they've joined CLS. At the end of the session, we say really hope to finish bang on 5:30. What we'd like everyone to do is just give us 5 minutes. We're just going to go down to the sort of amphitheatre and just take a photo. And then after that, you're free, obviously, till dinner, which I think is 7. But sort of come back for about 6:30, and then we'll dinner at 7, and then there are drinks afterwards. So, brilliant. All right, well, I'd like to introduce you to Pat Maver. Pat's from WATIF. And she's going to tell us a little bit about their community story. Thanks, Pat.
Hi everyone, as you can see, my name is Pat, and as Ailsa just said, I work for WATIF. I'm one of the founding members of WATIF. I was one of 4 women that put their heads above the parapet years ago and said, we'll sort this out amongst a room of community council with lots of men screaming and shouting at each other. So that was a few years ago. I'm now a full-time employee at WATIF. I was really looking forward to this conference. I thought it was great, but then unfortunately I was asked to speak at it, so I wasn't looking forward to that much, but there you go. But honestly, thanks to all the team. So far, I think it's been great. I think it's been a great conference so far. Looking forward to the rest of it, and also including the Nordert study yesterday. I think anybody that was there would agree that it was a brilliant place to visit, and obviously Community Land Scotland booked the weather as well. So thank you very much for that. So a bit more about us. Our vision. Our vision is of a beautiful and vibrant place with a great quality of life for all. WATIF stands for Wolford's, Auchengray and Terbrack's Improvement Foundation. We're a community development trust. That represents the 3 villages within our area, but lots of other settlements as well. You wouldn't believe how many times I've been approached and been told, you've missed the H out of WATIF. But no, that is the correct spelling. Our area. We're based in rural South Lanarkshire, some photos of our area, at the edge of the Pentland Hills, between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and more precisely midway between Lanark and Livingston, if anybody knows these areas. We're predominantly farmland with an ex-mining, post-industrial landscape. We were established in 2011 when those 4 women, and I was one of them, who stood up to negotiate the community benefit income from the wind farms that were coming into our area directly to our trust. That was vital to have this money to address the challenges and unmet needs of our community at that time, and rather it going off to the local authorities. We're right on the border of South Lanarkshire and West Lothian, so as you can imagine, there was no joined up thinking whatsoever. So, we were inundated. Our story so far, some pictures of some of our work and some of our successes. Community transport. We're not Lyle of Egg or whatever, we're right in central Scotland, but we had no public transport. We couldn't get to Lanark, we couldn't get to Livingston, couldn't get to Edinburgh, Glasgow. So, working in partnership with a local taxi company, we now provide a taxi bus service, and in the last few years, our community electric bus also takes residents to healthcare appointments further afield, as well as providing shopping, social trips, and also gets used by our primary school to take them to their swimming lessons, which we also pay for the swimming lessons, so it's brilliant, it works well. Community broadband, again, our broadband was very, very poor, and we weren't on the list on, I think it's called RS 100, we were completely forgotten. So what did we do? We worked in partnership with a local company called Borders Online, some of you may know them. We now provide our own community satellite broadband service, and we also offer vouchers to assist our residents with their installation costs as well. Community halls, we've got 3 halls. We helped rebuild and sort out rebuilding one of them, and we provide admin and finance support to the other ones. They're run by separate trusts. We didn't have no community shop, nothing. So in COVID, we opened a shop and a larder in one of the halls, and we rent that space, so we pay money back to that trust. Paths Network, developed our Paths Network and our environment and green spaces. Our first delve into community ownership was we purchased and developed a derelict property, which was our first affordable rental home. That was an interesting project, but it's now great, and it's been running now for a few years, and has provided a great rental home long term for a local young family. We've also done loads of activities over the years, far too many to mention. One thing we're really proud of is we provide a grant scheme. We provide grants for further education, driving lesson grants, local community improvement grants, and just recently we've set up crisis grants, and we're working in partnership with our local Citizens Advice Bureau to help distribute those crisis grants. So that's over 100 individuals and organisations that have benefited to date, with over £180,000 awarded to date. So what's next at WATIF? And that's the right spelling. Well, it's actually the wrong spelling. So our strategic review identified a few years ago the need for WATIF to own land and property. This would enable us to build on our successes to date and achieve our aims, which were enhancing health and well-being, increasing access to essential services, improving our local environment, and encouraging sustainable economic development by community ownership and creating local employment. Out of the blue, one winter's night, or dark winter's night in rural South Lanarkshire, I received a text about 2.5 years ago now, and we were offered the chance to buy Lone Head. Lone Head comprises of a farmhouse and a range of outbuildings. That's not even all of them. You wouldn't believe how many there are and how brilliant facilities they're going to be for us. And 20 acres of land right bang in the middle of our community. I mean, it was unbelievable. So we're supported by the Scottish Land Fund, and I'd love to be telling you today, yes, we own it, but no, we don't yet. But after a challenging 18 months of legals, we're very confident and hope that it'll be purchased, in June, in this year, 2023. So we're really excited. Well, when it happens, you can give us an applause. But yeah, it's been a challenge. This is an amazing opportunity to help us achieve our vision and provide a range of both community and income-generating projects, which include, moving our community shop, growing, loads of activities and services. But Lone Head has to be financially sustainable. Our plans include lots of income-generating projects such as a cafe, shop, events, and tourism accommodation, plus some other ones. But the real hard work begins now. So final thoughts and lessons learned. So some of the things that I've learned over the last few years is build community support, target easy wins to gain momentum if you're at the start of your journey or throughout your journey. I was saying to somebody earlier on, one thing we did was we just planted up, planters outside the villages, underneath the names of the villages, and oh my goodness, everybody thought we were amazing, and it was such an easy win. It worked well, Keep talking, keep engaging continually with your community, your stakeholders and partners. Bring them on your journey with you. Some of you here are probably the drivers, most of you probably are the drivers, but your passengers need to guide you in the direction of the travel. Lay solid foundations, be it governance, finance, all that boring stuff, I hate it. operations, I hate that even more, land and property. Get it right from the start. Take the time, I've learned that, I'm one of these people 100 miles an hour. Take the time, slow it down if necessary. Make sure it's fit for generations to come. Example we had at Lone Head, you know, it's an interesting one. Our right of access, we found out in legals that the people we're buying off didn't own the whole right of access, so it was like, we have to get this right. We can't just have the right of access, we need to own the whole part of it. So ended up finding out that the neighbouring farmer owned the right of access, so you can imagine how long that took negotiating that. So, but it was, you know, I felt and the board felt it was vitally important to make sure it was right and fit for purpose for generations to come. It's not about us, it's about the next generations. And then last top tip, which is why this conference is so brilliant, learn from others and always ask for help. Community land ownership is not an easy journey. In my past, a property past, like Ailsa here, I've probably completed over 1,000 property transactions in my day. I'm not a young person, including some very complicated ones. But the purchase of Lone Head far outweighs them all. Surround yourself with people who you trust to help and support you, and fill the skills gap. The skills are out there, just go out and find them, they're there. I'm always learning from others, and I'm always asking for help as well. So that's me. I hope you've enjoyed our journey so far. Thanks very much for listening, and please don't hesitate to contact me if you want any more info or any help. I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Pat. It's about the next generation. And I think that's really clear from all the work you're doing and all the work that everybody in this room is doing. And I think that's what we find sometimes so galling about the short-termism of the property market. It's about the next 5 years, not about the next 50 years. And we need to be thinking about how we look at changing that. So I think the other thing that I took away from that, you started off saying it's transport, it's broadband, it's community halls, it's community shops, paths, it's affordable houses, it's giving out crisis grants. You know, if anyone says, oh, do you think communities can do this? You know, you think, oh, go and see Pat down in the south. She'll tell you what they can do. And I think the other thing that was quite interesting is it started off from that community benefits from renewables. And it's something we've been thinking about a lot, you know, how you get that, what is growing and growing, the community benefits that might come from carbon, that might come from renewables, how you get it into Kate's communities, those exhausted communities that actually need sustainable income, how we make those links, because some communities have great access to that type of resource and can do brilliant things, but there are other communities that are desperate to do brilliant things. So I think that's a job for us to think how about we make those links between the two. So they were my takeaways, but any questions before we carry on for Pat? No, I think they're all just blown away, Pat. Oh, yeah. Should I hope there are no questions. So, right, I'll ask you to stay there if that's okay, and I'm going to ask Lindsay to come up and talk about 100 years of community ownership. Thanks, Lindsay.
So you'll have seen one of the themes of our conference this year is marking the centenary, so maybe you're wondering what that's all about. We are planning a big project that's going to go out and share all of your stories across Scotland over the next year or so, which is temporarily at least called 100 Years of Community Ownership. Lucy Conway's been working with us on this project for the last couple of years. She came along to just kind of help us think it through. She's now almost working for us. She's lent me her glasses today so I could read this presentation. I mean, I don't know what I would do without her. So if you came to the creative session, you'll have heard about my mission to make the people of Scotland cry, because I spend a lot of my time going around hearing community stories. I always find them really emotional, and we wanted to find a way of kind of really sharing the power of community stories with the wider world. The other people we know that are crying are historians as they hear the sound of important documents being shredded by community landowners. We know the sector's really humble and doesn't always see its place in Scotland's history, but we know how important that is, and we know historians are really keen to hold on to everything that you're gathering about your story. And then there's a whole number of people in Scotland who don't even know what they're missing because there's not much community ownership in large parts of Scotland, and the areas that we call cold spots, which are largely on the east coast of Scotland and in the Forth Valley. So we've come up with this project that we think are going to tackle all of those problems, and it's the 100 Years of Community Ownership project. So 100 years ago this year, the Stornoway Trust completed their transfer from Lord Leverhulme, and that's a really interesting story in itself. I think we've got someone here from the Stornoway Trust who might be able to tell you more about it. But there was lots happening in land 100 years ago, and so we thought this was a really good time to kind of mark that, but also to look forward 100 years. It feels like we're at a real turning point in terms of the land market in Scotland and the growth of community ownership. So we ran a number of projects in 2020 to 2022 where we worked with members on creative projects, helping them tell their story. And we ended up with a kind of weird and wonderful range of things at the end of it: maps, films, photos, walking sticks, bronze peats, podcasts. That's where I asked Lucy to come in and kind of, here you go, Lucy, why don't you make something coherent out of this strange range of things that we've collected? And Lucy and her co-worker, Leslie Young, really helped us think through how we could take those out and really make an impact. So we've got a number of kind of strands that we're going to be running over the next year. We've already got funding from the Scottish Government to do some of the work, and we're about to put a funding application into the Heritage Lottery to do the rest. We've developed some exciting partnerships with other organisations as well that will help us tell the stories, but also make sure those stories are kept for historians of the future. So what will it look like? So step one is we're going to be going around and collecting stories from community landowners. The idea is we'll have story captures who'll be going out in an electric camper van, and they'll be teaching our members oral history techniques so that you can collect stories from your communities. These days you can collect these stories through iPhones, so we'd be really keen to hear if that is something you'd be interested in being involved in, whether that would be a useful thing to use to collect the stories. We're also really keen to get children involved in that story collection, and we'll also be going around kind of sneakily picking up archives and objects into the camper van for our future collections. We're going to be working with a couple of universities, hopefully, and this has really come about through the Community Land Ownership Network, academic network. They're hoping to hold archiving ceilidhs where they'll work with communities to embed techniques around community archives. We're also going to be commissioning some new work. So we've got, as I mentioned, we've got this collection of works, but we're going to be commissioning new work so that we can tell this kind of complete story of community ownership. And then Community Land Week will be coming back this year, but it'll be Community Land Fortnight. We're going that big, we're going for 2 weeks this year. The Scottish Government has given us some extra funding for that, which we'll be using to give out more bursaries to communities, but more excitingly creating some 100th anniversary bunting. Very excited about that. We'll be creating a website as well, so we can tell all these stories to people that can't actually physically maybe attend some of the sessions, so people will be able to go on there, hear communities speaking about their community ownership journey, watch films, look at photographs. We're hoping to have a series of discussion-based lectures as well, so we can get those discussions going about what we want the next 100 years to look like, and we'll be going into cold spots telling inspiring stories. Hopefully we can get the East Coast warmed up a little bit. And finally, and really excitingly, Lucy has been able to pull off a bit of a coup. She has persuaded the Travelling Gallery, which is a touring art bus, that they should go out and tell this story next year. They're going to go out and take their bus around various parts of Scotland with the stories, with some of the objects, and share your stories with everybody, and hopefully that will end up at the Edinburgh Festival. And Lucy tells me the art bus is about the size of the Screen Machine, if you've seen the Screen Machine, and that will be driving around Scotland next year. So between all of those things, we will get to most of Scotland over the next year, or so the staff team's going to be out and about a lot. Lucy tells me she's going to give me a camper van for a week to do whatever I like, which I'm quite excited about. We've also developed a partnership with the National Museum of Scotland and National Libraries of Scotland, who will take a lot of what we collect and hold on to it for the future. And we're also hoping to look at how we can help communities develop their own archives so we can keep some of these stories close to home. So hopefully we'll be setting everything up ready for everyone to celebrate the 200th anniversary in 100 years' time. So really keen to hear your feedback and if you've got any questions about this project that we're planning. Is that a good idea? Do you think that oral history part of it, do you think that's something that you'd be interested in? Because I think that's quite critical to the way that Lucy has planned the project, that we can go out and we can get all of you to be collecting the stories from your own communities. Or talk to Lucy and I over dinner tonight over a glass of wine. That is your other option.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Lindsay. Great. Okay, final session then. We've had a bit of change in directors at Community Land Scotland this year. So we've got 3 new directors I'm going to ask to come up to the stage. But first of all, I'd like to thank a couple of directors who are standing down. Lincoln Richford, who's here, but I can't see him. Where is he? Oh, he's over there, he's hiding. So Lincoln's been with us for 6 years. He's standing down this year, but he's been a huge support to the directors and the staff team. He's represented the South really well and the voice of the South really well, and I think we'd all like to thank him for his work. And then another director who unfortunately can't be here today, many of you know Martin Avila, who was at Kinning Park and now is at CEIS, and Martin's also stepping down. I think he's been with us for probably about 5 years, so once you're in, you don't get let out very easily. But I'd like to introduce our 3 new directors, Kate, who you've heard from today, and Bridie from Edinburgh, and John from Ullapool, if you're happy to join us on the stage. What I've asked Bridie, Kate and John to do is just a couple of minutes about a bit of their background so you can see how Community Land Scotland is developing, why they were keen to get involved, what they hope to see Community Land Scotland achieve over the next wee while, and then there's an opportunity for questions. Okay, so who wants to start? John. Got your voluntold by the sound of it. Yeah.
Just for illustration, I'm John Tull. My background, I for far too long was a partner in an accountancy firm, and I was acting for those private landowners who were looking to buy more land and accumulate more wealth and legitimately dodge their taxes. So I had some health issues, then I saw the light, and I no longer do that. So I'm now really passionate about trying to, rather than helping individuals and families to do that, to actually do that at community level, things like employee ownership, community ownership, and really trying to get involved in those areas. So that's kind of what led me to Community Land Scotland, and really enjoyed being involved. It's a great bunch of people, lots of inspiring people which I think has really encouraged me to get more involved. So that's me.
Thanks, John.
It's very humbling to join a board of such interesting folk, and I think both Kate and I do find sometimes it's like a masterclass in various things. So we feel we're both learning a lot. And maybe to say, when I moved to Scotland, I knew nobody as well. It was a way to get to know people. So, I think one of the really brilliant things about Scotland at the moment is a place where if you follow through on what you say you will do. So I helped somebody on the board, and that got me my first reference. I think that ability to actually do things from wherever you are, I think is really interesting. I think it's a whole emphasis on place. and a sense of connection with place. So my own background is I'm actually Irish. Had lived in London for a long time and worked both in big things, but I really like small things because they move fast. So I think that's one of the things about Community Land Scotland. Things are often very fast and agile. I have been involved in the startup of a few things in terms of charity and community spaces, for example, in the drug space, in the art space in terms of film. But most recently, I was actually involved in a piece of work in Broomhouse. This is an area of high poverty in Edinburgh. Edinburgh, but not as people know Edinburgh. Very diverse community, almost 20% non-white British folk there. It's very affordable housing, so actually people of colour are moving in with many different languages, and meanwhile you've got communities very injured in terms of the past, people placed there due to housing that was again affordable, but actually there was often sort of drugs or alcohol problems in the community. A lot of people died to HIV and AIDS there in the early 90s. But actually that ability of that community to get organised and be involved in the development of an asset was so inspiring, by having local people on the board to help guide us, and actually quite a lot of parties. Food and community activities outside helped people negotiate the space and connect with it rather than it just being the chosen few. So the street party was a really big part of every year. We managed to achieve that build. So I think in joining the board, I would really like to see partnerships between rural and urban, because so many of you here inspire us in urban communities in terms of the optimism and the skills that there are. Could there be partnerships? There certainly can be, at least in the visits between those things, and there's the resources, the grants to make the visits between the two. Because our challenges, the big challenges in a way planetary around climate, but also that actually, during COVID, we have seen resources just go away from ordinary humans. That the cost of living crisis is not going to go away anytime soon. So I think resilient people in resilient communities that address the trauma within those communities by working together and supporting each other are really powerful. So it's really humbling to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I feel like I've been on this side of the table far too much today, and I'm also the last thing between when we break up and then have our dinner, so I'll not be very long, but I just wanted to say it has been really humbling and inspiring to learn from the board, an incredible range of expertise and skills, so it just feels like I'm kind of trying to ride the waves of all the information that's going on. But the reason I think the reason we're invited to join the board is because in 2018 at a Community Land Scotland event, my chair and I said, oh, we've got to do this, we've got to ensure our building is kept for the next generation and developed. And I think it was about that whole idea of how you engage people with a place, how you inspire people about a place, and then the ultimate aim of that is to be able to shape it by owning it. And I was thinking, why was this so important to us? I think in an urban setting it's really interesting, but then I was thinking, why is this so important to me personally? And I was reflecting back in, I trained in fine art back in the 80s and then moved back to Belfast in 89 when property was not very valuable, and a loose collection of young people, of which I was one then, no longer, but we got a lease for 12 years on a building that we shaped and ran ourselves, and whenever you're 21, 12 years feels like forever, but unfortunately it's not, and that building went, and I'm now starting to reflect what would have happened if we'd bought that building, and I so wish we had. So I hope, this being here in this room and hearing all these voices from Scotland is so inspiring, and I hope we as custodians can encourage that.
And it's around the big challenges. So I think challenges either facing Community Land Scotland as an organisation or facing the community land sector. So either, but perhaps if you could take one each and let us know what you think. So I don't know who wants to start.
First, the Whitehall, it's been discussed quite a lot today, the concern around, already we have a concentrated pattern of land ownership, and we see that moving from, I guess, the traditional landed gentry to corporations looking to greenwash and whatever. And if we talk about a 3 to 5 year timescale, the concern is that if nothing is done, then that trend is going to accelerate. And yeah, so the need for much more community land ownership, or these people not being able to buy land, how we do that, and just see that as a big issue in terms of, yes, there's a climate emergency, but getting the community land and community ownership is a key part of that. Otherwise, we could see quite frightening scenarios when our land is being owned by pension funds and financiers, and seeing traditional Highland estates being marketed as being of having green potential or natural capital potential, which wasn't the case a few years ago. It's alarming. So.
I think a lot of you will be with you there, John. Bridie.
I think, just to say, really, one of the really big challenges. I think mine's almost an opportunity and a challenge. I think it's get organised, because I think there's a lot of potential, specifically in the community wealth building legislation that's coming forward in Scotland. The opportunity to hear from the Commissioner for the Future from Wales, and they were talking about how they've really put well-being at the core of the way structurally Wales is looking at itself. But what's really interesting is hearing how communities are using it themselves, particularly around well-being. But the powers of community wealth building are actually around money we've already have, because we often think there is no money, but actually there are assets and there's resources in our what are called anchor institutions, which is a language in community wealth building. You know, the analysis of around Edinburgh, there's 2.5 billion worth of public infrastructure going in the next 5 years. Will any of that go into a just transition and people in areas of high poverty getting jobs? Not unless we get organised. So I think, you know, where schools being built in your community, where your hospital is doing something in your community, or all of these different things, is actually make sure those private contractors are looking at jobs, at skills, is actually looking at all the pillars. So I will quote somebody else, Neil McEnroy, who's working with the Scottish Government right now. It's money scooching awa, as the Scots is, my Irish is terrible, Irish version of that. But you know, it's actually where are the resources that actually we can apply to these processes and to have optimism about that. And the biggest resource, I think, is people. So I think get organised. Yeah.
Get organised, great. Kate?
Yeah, so I think I want to steal a phrase of yours, Bridie. How do we get the ordinary humans and that enthusiasm on the ground to meet the rhetoric and the levers that are there, that we just haven't quite, just how do we bridge that gap? I think it's a real challenge, but I think that's what we're all here to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks. I think we're going to finish up there. We're going to have the photo outside, so if you'll follow Meg, we'll only take 5 minutes of your time. I think tomorrow, if we can all make sure we're back prompt for 9:30 is when we're starting, and then we'll make sure that we can run to time. Thanks, everyone.